Are you working with AI, artificial intelligence yet? Well, I've started to, and it's fascinating, specifically when you work with content. Now, SEO is changing rapidly because of artificial intelligence. So in the upcoming session, we're going to look into how actually AI influences content, the AI tools you better be using in 2021 for your SEO game, the do's and the don'ts. We'll dive into it right now. Welcome to our SEO Artificial Intelligence session.
Hi there, my name is Jon Epstein and I'm CEO of Bruco. Thanks for coming to my session today. I'd like to explore 3 different ways in which AI is transforming search engine optimization. What I hope you'll learn from today's presentation is first, what sorts of AI tools are now available to help SEO teams and SEO agencies do better optimization. The second is to look at how AI is changing the ways in which we can understand how search engines work and how they consider keywords and how they match your sites against your most important keywords. I'd like to cover a little bit on pitfalls you might want to avoid and things you might want to consider when looking at different AI solutions. And then finally, we have a really exciting perk. I just want to let you know about it. And if it looks like something interesting, I invite you to take advantage of it. I've been working in AI for marketing for 8 or 9 years now, and it's been very exciting to see this latest wave of AI and how it's been revolutionizing marketing, really in all areas of marketing. And outside of SEO, here are a few of the things that I have been most excited about and the challenges that they're solving. So the first one relates to experience design. How do you come up with the best design for your online experience when there are literally millions, if not billions, of potential possibilities? The old way of doing things was A/B testing. And A/B testing is still really important, but it's a very slow and painstaking way to figure out what design is going to best convert your users. And so companies like Evolve are now using AI to accelerate that process so that you can consider and test about 30 different changes and the millions of combinations of those changes all at once. Another area that's been really challenging in online marketing has been, how do you attribute what makes someone click to your site or buy your product when you touch them across many different touch points? Those touch points might be digital, social, or search, or display, or content, or email, but they may also be physical, billboards, other real-world ways of touching people. So trying to figure out what's involved in making someone pull the trigger, as it were, is very difficult. And fortunately, we're seeing companies like Adobe on the big company front and startups like SegmentStream really starting to make headway against this problem. And when you get a handle on what really is motivating the buy, it really helps you be more efficient in your media and marketing mix. Speaking of that, people that do SEO often do a huge amount of paid search marketing as well, and they're evaluating that against other forms of advertising. And knowing how and where to spend your dollars is a pretty tough task given the amount of data that flows around any campaign and the many variables around it. So we have companies like Finch that are looking at the best ways to optimize your search marketing spend, and they do it very well. And other companies like Peak.ai that look at the mix of different channels and how best to adapt. And then finally, and kind of in a cool way, the way in which ads are being produced is changing. Models can be very expensive if you're developing video creative. And copywriters aren't that cheap, and translation can be a big expense. And often people have spent more money producing their ads than they've been able to spend getting them out in front of their buying public. But fortunately, a group of AI companies are attacking those 3 very problems. You have Rosebud, who is creating AI models that you can use in your videos, so you don't need to hire anyone. Persado has shown tremendous excellence in writing copy for offers and for emails and email subject lines. and testing and seeing what works the best to convert the user. And then companies like Synthesia are doing amazing work in translating videos for multiple different languages and even personalizing them so they speak to the customer really on as much of a one-to-one way as you can get. Now, AI is now entering the halls of SEO. It's been a little time in coming, but we're starting to see really exciting solutions come to the forefront. And I wanted to look at 3 different areas of SEO. This isn't all of the areas where people are using AI to enhance the search engine optimization process, but it's 3 pretty important ones. So the first one is content generation. Sites involve a lot of content, and how you write it and how you diagram it, if you would, can make a tremendous impact on your search. So I'll look at some of the companies doing interesting work there. Link building has been a very arduous and time-consuming process to date, but there's no substitute for backlinks, good backlinks, to build your domain authority, which is very important over time. And so there's at least one company doing very interesting automation of that process. And then finally, we see companies like ourselves making great strides in really understanding how search engines think, if you would. And by understanding that, being able to make search engine optimization into a much more precise and data-driven science, as opposed to what some people might call the art of SEO today. Before we dig into the tools, I thought it might be useful to just talk, for those of you that aren't super familiar with AI, about 2 of the main types of AI. They're good at different types of problems and solving them. Neural networks are modeled on the human brain. There are input layers. You might think of those as the eyes or the senses. And there are output layers, which are the decisions you make based on those inputs. If you're a mind, what you see or feel or taste or smell. And then there's many layers in between them that essentially form the basis for those decisions. So neural networks replicate that. Some of them are very, very, very large. They're not human brain large, but they're getting quite large. And typically they require training. Someone would have to, if you're doing computer vision neural networking, you'd have humans label different pictures, that this is a cat, this is a dog, and you'd feed it through the network until the network essentially is able to replicate those decisions on its own. And then if it sees a picture, it'll tell you that's 89% likely to be a chihuahua and 11% likely to be a muffin. And so search engines themselves are neural networks. They're considering large amounts of inputs about the sites that they're crawling and looking at, and many different aspects about them. They're considering the user and where that user is, and the user intent as much as they define it. Computer vision is a very classic neural network solution. And GPT-3, which generates content, it's for generating content for different applications. That's currently the world's largest neural network. It comes out of OpenAI, which is a open source AI movement funded by some very interesting companies. Now, genetic algorithms are a wholly different branch of AI, and they don't require training at all. Rather than being modeled on the human brain, they simulate evolutionary approaches, those same things that created man and other species from original, one-celled life that existed. So evolution is a very powerful way to optimize for a certain goal. And evolutionary algorithms or genetic algorithms, they don't require training. They just require a goal and a method for how it would evolve. So it's often modeled on human replication. And so you have genes that combine and random mutations and things like that. But basically it steps through a series of these evolutions until it finds its way to the best possible solution, and it can't do any better. And interestingly, and we do apply this at our company, they can be used to figure out what's going on in neural networks and to understand what's going on inside. Because the biggest problem with neural networks, as we all know with search engines like Google, is you really don't know how they're making the decisions they do. So looking at content generation, it's such an important part of search engine optimization, such an important part of just running a website or a mobile site. And there's some really great technologies and tools out there. The first is a technology. I mentioned it, GPT-3. You can find links to this on the web. It's freely available. And you put in subjects, or you can start a story, or you can start a conversation. It continues and it writes amazing content. It's pretty uncanny. It's slightly off. You can tell it's not a human writer at a certain point, but it can be hard to tell for a while. And it really is a glimpse into the future of generative content and what AI will do to help us all create more content and more relevant content. Someone already doing that using AI is a company called Narrativa. It's a Spanish company. They have offices in the US as well. And they're using the predecessor neural network, GPT-2. And they're used by some really, really large media organizations to generate thousands of articles. So things like sports scores and weather reports and other types of content that don't require a deep opinion or reporting, but are really around how do you best present the facts in a way that's consistent and makes sense to the reader of those. It's a tremendously powerful tool. So depending on your type of organization, you might want to take a look at that. Phrase is also an up-and-coming company in the world of AI content generation. They've been doing interesting work in chatbots, helping answer questions that come in chatbots. They're focusing in SEO is about how do you structure your content so that you can best answer the questions of the users, and by extension, be the one featured in question searches as the answer for that question. It can be a very powerful place to rank. And so with Phrase, if you tell it what keywords you want to optimize for, it automates the content brief using AI and makes really defined suggestions on what your writers might want to do to optimize to win those searches. And then in a completely different domain, very complementary with these other approaches and really any content, there's a company called WordLift. WordLift is about the semantic understanding of content. How do different words relate to meaning? How do different concepts relate to each other? It creates a knowledge graph of your site's content and how it relates within itself and also to known other entities and other concepts. And it builds a schema, a description of this. And when you have this on your website that the search engines can crawl, the search engine has a much greater understanding, not just of the words of your content, but of the meaning of it, and it helps you rank for searches. So really cool stuff, and something I urge you to take a look at. Now, building domain rank is an arduous process at best. It's really important most of the time. Never a bad thing to do, to be clear. And mostly people have turned to agencies to do this, or they hire people to do the outreach, and it's a slow process for sure. And if you do it correctly, you can elevate your domain rank relatively quickly. And if you do it incorrectly, you can really penalize your scores. So you have to be really careful about the kinds of sites that you link to. And Link Hunter takes an approach that it analyzes the content of your website and then selects based on that, and from its crawling of the web, what would be high value and high authority sites that you should try to get backlinks from. And then it automates the process in a very compelling way to outreach to these sites and to recruit links from them. There's a variety of ways they do that, proposing blog postings or other types of guest content. Very good success rate with this approach because it really automates what otherwise is a painstaking process if someone on your team is doing it. And then it tracks and monitors the backlinks that are generated and what it does. Where we come from is really to answer a different question that I think has been very challenging for the industry, which is what should I be working on today to win my search? And if you're familiar with best practice lists, or if you're familiar with site audits you get from many platforms, there are thousands. For big sites, it can actually be many more of potential fixes you could do. Different errors on different pages, ways that your page title should be adjusted, missing alt text, what have you, whatever the issue is. And I've never met an SEO team that felt it was fully resourced, that they had enough time or resources to do everything they wanted to do. So that makes it tough in the first place. You don't really know what's going to work. You get these rankings that this is high importance and medium importance and low importance, but you're not quite sure which is which. And compounding the difficulties of that is the fact that every search engine is different. It considers every query differently. How it considers your site for one keyword and the attributes of your site might be very differently for another keyword unless it's very closely related. Google US and Google Australia and Google UK will process the same query in the same language very differently. So it's really hard to map your tasks if you're trying to optimize against different search engines and keywords, and more so if you're doing different regions. So the only way you could really figure this out would be to reverse engineer the search engines themselves, but that's been a pretty impossible task given that the search engines are neural networks. They're always evolving. Even the engineers at Google, they can tell you the major updates they're making, but if you ask them, how do you think about this search or that search, they don't know. The neural network knows it's evolved to optimize the results they want to see from their searches. So we went ahead and we built a system that could get pretty darn close to reverse engineering search engines. And that's what Market Brew does. Market Brew builds simulations of search engines using AI to build those simulations. The software is the only platform that has its own search engine built into it. And that search engine has all of the same considerations in terms of semantic content and various factors and links and domain rank, all those things that go into ranking a page, as you'll see from any modern search engine. Market Brew, when it is given an assignment, so you would give it a keyword and a target search engine, you'd let it know what your site is. How it optimizes and matches the search engine to that query is it'll go and download the SERP, the top 100 results from the target search engine for your keyword. And then it will do this evolutionary process, a branch of genetic algorithms called particle swarm optimization, which is based on how birds flock. And it will continue to have the birds fly around until such time as it understands the parameters of its own neural network that will generate a SERP out of the Market Brew engine that matches the SERP that's coming out of your target search engine. So once you have that, you've essentially ripped the cover off the black box that is Google or any other search engine, because now we know, and Market Brew will tell you, exactly what is important for a given search. And again, I'll remind you, it's very different from search to search. So what you see on the screen here is a set of factors. For any given search engine, we have a baseline model. That's the standard model. We don't reveal what that is, but how those factors are weighted up or down or adjusted really is different from any given search. This is an example when you'll see that link flow really isn't as important and domain rank doesn't matter that much. Sometimes we see those things are zero, whereas market focus and the page title are at full rate. So every major pillar is here. We'll be adding core web vitals as they start to become a ranking factor. And within each of these, there's a multiple sub-factors that have to be considered to produce these scores. So when you start to understand what's important for this search in this place, and then the model goes out and it crawls, like many solutions do, it'll crawl websites, but it's crawling it against the simulation. It's looking for how well do you stack up against those considerations and how different are you from those sites that are above you or below you in the search engine rankings, so that you can start to get a handle on not just are they above you or below you in the search engine ranking, but exactly how close are you? Are you within a hair's breadth of taking over, or is it going to be a long slog? And similarly, is the guy behind you nipping at your heels, or is it, are you relatively safe? So when you know what factors matter, that domain rank doesn't matter in this particular case, it may be different for another keyword, and that semantics do matter, you'll know what gaps you need to close or widen to maintain your lead. And then using AI, the system is able to give very precise recommendations on exactly the steps you should take to do that. Here's the places on different pages you should link from in priority order, remove this number of words from this page because you're keyword stuffing, or add this number of words to this page because you don't have enough focus on it. So it's very interesting to see the detail. There's a tremendous amount of detail when you have this kind of model. And I think one of the most remarkable things, and this really does change SEO, is you have the ability to test what's going to happen when you make a change. Now, normally in SEO, when you make changes to the site, you'll make a set of changes. Things like text will update in the search, but the actual rankings can take up to 2 months to update based on those changes that you made. So you're not really quite sure whether it's going to work or not. Obviously people have made their best guess. And when it happens, if it happens, you're not necessarily sure which of the things you did worked or not. And when you have a search engine simulation, in the time it takes to do a site crawl, which is a couple hours, as opposed to 2 months, you can run a simulated search and see, if I make these changes, this is what it's going to do to my ranking power, my score, and what that means in terms of SERP rankings. While it's doing that, it's also analyzing your competitors and watching your competitors' moves, your direct competitors, or other people you just compete for rank with, even if you don't compete with them for sales. And the system will be able to say, hey, these guys are on the move, they're moving up in this area, it'll show up in 2 months, and it gives you ample time to counteract whatever they're doing. So you have this ability to see in the future, which is really based on the lag of the current search engines, how long it takes them to process what it's crawled and update their rankings. What this all comes down to, though, is being able to work with 100% efficiency, right? There's so much you can do in SEO. This whole notion of best practices, they're not bad. I would never say they're bad, but many of them don't apply for any given circumstance. So we can spend a lot of time spinning our wheels, and it's not the most efficient or effective way to get gains faster. So if you have a handle, if you take the cover off the black box, you understand what drives the search, you can really approach SEO in a new way, a more data-driven and predictable way. And by the way, a way that gets much more support from executives that aren't coming from the SEO space, that maybe have been leery about the long time cycles and the true lack of predictability that has existed in the methods to date. We think we're changing on that. So one of the things we're offering as a perk is a site analysis, and I just wanted to comment, this will be different than what you had before. I hope you'll find this of interest. It is free for sites that are of a sufficient size to use this kind of technique. It'll provide the top-down view, the same as any other site. We'll know exactly all of the errors you have on your site and all the technical fixes, the thousands of things, the laundry list we call it. But you'll get this bottom-up view that will make recommendations such as you should spend 80% of your effort focused around how internal links are flowing, removing link penalties, and maybe reducing the amount of outflow. But spend 20% of your time in semantic factors and specifically working on the market focus of the page. And the system will give you, and we summarize this for you, very detailed reports and recommendations on how you should optimize to fix these things and remove things that are holding you back. So in short, you'll know from this kind of analysis, not just everything you could do, you'll know what's important, you'll know why it's important, and you'll know what you need to do to fix it. I thought I'd spend a little bit of time on some AI pitfalls because I am in the business of AI for marketing, but I think it's really important to be a realist about some of the issues around AI. It's a term that's bandied about much. It has huge potential. We're seeing it now today. But it's not without its issues. So just a couple of things to look at. The first is that the content generation side of it, I think copywriters can breathe easy for at least a couple more years. It's really an imperfect art. Do test out GPT-3 if you haven't already. You'll see what I mean. It'll be great for long tail type of stuff. It'll be great for kind of SEO content that doesn't necessarily matter, or at least giving you a head start, but it does require human intervention. And sometimes it can be outright silly. It's inconsistent. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes it creates content that's really quite foolish. So a lot of fun to play with. A second one is that many companies claim AI. I mean, I'm not sure of many SEO tools out there that don't say they have some AI. So it can be very difficult to know if you're trying to evaluate tools. Do they really have AI? Is the AI an important component of their software? Is it more of a marketing phrase? And it is hard to tell, I will say. You should ask them about really precise details about how their methods, the form of AI they're using, what are the drawbacks to the AI approach they're doing. If they have patents, that's a really good sign typically that they're doing something unique that was worth protecting. They probably would have done that. So these are all good questions to ask, and you'll hone your gut and be able to get a sense of what is and what isn't. I think it's really important to keep in mind that AI is, in many ways, a branch of statistics. AI makes statistical predictions. And so it's right much of the time, but it is not right all of the time. So if you go in thinking AI will be right 100% of the time, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to oversell it to others in your company, and problems will ensue. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I think the analogy that I like to use is about poker players. Everyone pretty much knows the rules of poker, but some people are really, really, really good at it. And it's not just that they can read human emotions, that's part of it, and tells. It's that they do the math around each hand, and every move they make is calculated to have a net positive value. But that doesn't mean they win all the time. Someone can get lucky and beat them. That's what makes poker so appealing even to people that aren't professional poker players. But every time the professional poker player will win in the long haul. So statistics matter. Just keep that in mind. And then finally, AI is not coming for your job. It will change the nature of jobs. SEO, I can see it really revolutionizing how people are able to do SEO and the importance that SEO plays in the organization. The argument I would make is that not doing AI, not evaluating tools like the ones we discussed here, whether it's mine or anyone else's, is not going to serve you well for your future career. So it's really important to get an understanding of what's out there. How can it help me? How can it help me save time or do things better than I were, or save money, whatever the benefit might be, so that you stay on top of SEO and it doesn't stay on top of you. As I mentioned, we're offering free analyses for 2 different keywords for AdWorld attendees. So we have some examples of some of the pages of that off to the right. And I hope you'll check it out. It could be worth a lot. It is worth a lot if we were to provide it as a consulting thing. I think more importantly, many of the people that we have given this to have seen very profound revenue uplifts from the recommendations that we give, even on a single analysis. So with a few crawls, 3 or 4 different crawls of the site and competitive sites, in the case of one keyword, we generate recommendations and really a lot of things that can keep your team occupied, very efficiently and effectively, and generate, we've seen more than 100,000 in incremental revenue value just from a few crawls, which is a very low cost. So these reports give you an idea of what's driving the factors around each search and key actions that you should take, and who's ahead in what areas and who's behind. In summary, really, just you'll know what's important, you'll know why it's important, and you'll know how to optimize for it. So that's what I have for you today. In closing, I just want to encourage you all to continue your exploration of AI for SEO and for other marketing disciplines. We love to talk about these pursuits. Bruco is a new company that has the exclusive worldwide resale rights to the Market Brew platform. And so we're eager to make relationships with people that want to do guest blogs on our site, or just want to talk about AI, or have us chime in on their site. We just like to be part of the discussion. So thank you so much for coming, and hope to see you online. Bye-bye.